Chapter 1. The first note was on the bathroom mirror. Ivan Morales woke to the blaring sound of his phone alarm and the sharp realization that he had overslept. Again, the hazy spring sun filtered through the beige curtains of his apartment above Once Upon a Spine, the bookstore he owned and barely kept afloat. His sheets were twisted around him like he'd battled something in his dreams. Knowing his luck, probably overdue bills. He groaned, slapped at his phone until the alarm stopped, and stumbled toward the bathroom, nearly tripping over a stack of sci-fi novels he'd meant to reshelve last night. He yawned, flipped on the bathroom light, and stopped cold. Words were written on the mirror. Not on the glass, exactly, but inside the fog. As if someone had used their finger to carve letters into the steam from a long-ago shower, and the residue had reappeared now that the glass was clear again. "You're going to meet him today. Don't wear those horrible socks." Ivan blinked at it. Once, twice. Then rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand and stared again. Still there. The handwriting looked eerily familiar. Lazy loops and sharp slants, as though the person who wrote it had been impatient or distracted. Ivan leaned closer. What the hell? He peered into the mirror at his reflection. Dark curls sticking out like he'd been electrocuted, pillow lines on one cheek, his ripped TBR t-shirt wrinkled beyond salvation. Okay, either someone broke in, fogged up my mirror, and decided to prank me, he muttered. Or I'm sleep writing now. He grabbed a towel and wiped the mirror clean, with one aggressive swipe. Gone. And good riddance. He had better things to do than hallucinate love notes to himself. 15 minutes later, after brushing his teeth with too much force and pouring cold coffee from yesterday's pot into a travel mug, Ivan opened his sock drawer and stared. His fingers hovered over a pair of plain gray socks before swerving decisively toward the pair with cartoon dinosaurs holding books, the ones he always wore when he needed luck or confidence, or just something ridiculous to distract himself from his own anxiety. "Horrible socks, my ass," he mumbled, tugging them on. Every Saturday in the neighborhood meant the street food fair just 4 blocks down. Since he hadn't bought groceries all week and couldn't survive another day of ramen noodles, Ivan closed the bookstore early and wandered down, sunglasses perched on his head and an iced matcha in hand. The fair buzzed with energy, music spilling from a busker's speakers, toddlers wobbling around in sun hats, people clustered in line for fresh dumplings, Vietnamese iced coffee, and pastries dusted with edible glitter. He was halfway through sipping his matcha and eyeing a stall selling wood-fired pizza slices when it happened. A sharp elbow clipped his arm. A sneeze behind him startled him. And somehow his cup jerked and tipped, and bright green liquid sloshed all over his shirt. "Son of a—" "Whoa, hey, hold on! Here, use this!" A hand thrust a brown napkin toward him. Ivan grabbed it instinctively and started patting at his shirt, swearing under his breath. When he looked up to thank the stranger, his words caught in his throat. The guy was gorgeous. Not in a model on a magazine way, but in a you'd notice him in a crowd without trying kind of way. Dark waves of hair, golden olive skin, and forearms dusted with tattoos that hinted at stories Ivan wanted to know. His eyes were dark, almost black but kind, and his smile tilted slightly to one side like he was perpetually 2 seconds away from saying something smartass. "Let me guess," the man said. "First time holding a drink?" "Excuse me?" The stranger grinned. "I mean, that's gotta be it. You look like you just lost a war with matcha." Ivan looked down at his shirt and groaned. It was limited edition. Lavender and vanilla. "I drove across town for this." He scowled at his chest. "And it tastes like regret now." "Well, at least it's fashion forward. You match the food truck down the block. Want me to walk you over and get you a new one? I make a killer horchata." Ivan arched a brow. "You work in a food truck?" "Own one," he pointed. "That one over there. G's Gourmet. It's new. Official debut was 2 days ago. You like tacos?" Ivan nodded slowly, suspicious of the perfect teeth and confident posture. "Who doesn't?" "Exactly. I'm Gale, by the way." He extended his hand. Ivan shook it, hesitantly. "Ivan? Ivan?" Gale tried it out like a flavor, then let go. "You have dinosaur socks." Ivan looked down, his cheeks coloring. "Are those T-Rexes reading books?" Ivan cleared his throat. "They're classy." "They're something," Gale said, clearly amused. "You don't see footwear like that every day." Ivan's brain short-circuited. The mirror, the note. "You're going to meet him today. Don't wear those horrible socks." He stared at Gale for a beat too long. What? Nothing, Ivan said quickly, backing up half a step. I mean, thanks for the napkin and the fashion critique. Gale smirked. Anytime. You should stop by the truck. First tacos on me. Why? Because you're cute when you panic. Ivan flushed and turned around so fast he nearly tripped over a corgi on a leash. Gale's laugh followed him down the street. Back at the bookstore that night, Ivan paced his small office while his cat, Milton, watched him with the exasperated gaze of someone who'd seen too many crises already this week. I'm not crazy, Ivan told him. The note was real. He said something about my socks. He made fun of them. That's not a coincidence. Milton yawned. Ivan pulled out his leather-bound journal and started writing furiously. Today I met someone. His name is Gale. He owns a taco truck. He has laugh lines and forearms that belong in a cooking show calendar. He smiled at me, flirted with me, not in a fake way, I think. And the note, who the hell wrote that? It looked like my handwriting. I'm losing it, right? Or not? He paused, took a breath, and reached for the bookmark. But something slipped out of the journal and fluttered to the floor. A folded piece of paper. Ivan picked it up slowly. It was thick, not notebook paper, more like old stationery. The handwriting, when he unfolded it, was unmistakable. His. Don't let him make the first move. You'll regret it. Ivan stared at the words, the loop of the D, the way he dotted the I just slightly too far to the left. I didn't write this, he whispered. I didn't. But he had. He would. His legs gave out, and he sank into the nearest chair. Milton jumped onto his lap like the seasoned emotional support feline he was. The night was silent, except for the hum of the mini-fridge and the distant sound of someone playing the saxophone across the street. Ivan looked down at the note, still in his hand. Then, in a voice barely audible even to himself, he said, What the hell is happening? Chapter 2. Notes, Nachos, and Nearly Losing My Mind. Ivan had stopped questioning the notes. Well, no, that was a lie. He still questioned them hourly. But after 3 mornings of finding folded paper tucked inside cereal boxes, socks, and once horrifyingly his cat's collar, he was beginning to accept them the same way one accepts gravity or their tendency to over-apologize during conversations. This morning's note was taped to his toothbrush with washi tape. It read, Don't trust the guy with the chin piercing. And yes, he does like your hair messy. Stop fixing it, nerd. Ivan stared at the mirror, still half asleep inside. Future me has the manners of a caffeinated raccoon. Still, he left his curls alone that day. It was mid-morning, and the bookstore was empty, except for a retired teacher browsing the poetry section and the low hum of Ivan's indie playlist echoing through the shelves. He sat behind the counter with a latte and a stack of receipts he was actively ignoring, rereading the taco truck review he'd posted online. Gale's Gourmet doesn't just serve tacos, it serves emotional restoration between warm corn tortillas. 10-10. Would emotionally spiral here again. He chuckled to himself, sipping. It had been a good taco. And maybe the guy behind the counter had been even better. The door chimed. Ivan looked up, expecting the teacher to have forgotten her wallet. Instead, Gale stood in the doorway, framed by sunlight, holding 2 paper cups and wearing a smirk that did not help Ivan's resting heartbeat. You didn't tell me you moonlighted as a food critic, Gale said, approaching the counter. Ivan blinked. How did you? You posted it with your bookstore's handle. Gale grinned. And your face is on your website. It wasn't exactly detective work, Ivan flushed. Right, yeah. Thanks. I mean, you're welcome? Wait, are you mad? Gale raised a brow and handed him one of the cups. Spicy hot chocolate, my way of saying thanks for the kind words. And no, not mad. That review made 3 new people come to the truck. One of them asked if I could emotionally spiral with them over churros. Ivan laughed, tension easing. It was accurate. You exaggerate, Gale said, leaning on the counter. Ivan took a sip and promptly made an embarrassing noise. This is unfairly good. Like I want to cry and punch someone at the same time. Perfect reaction, Gale said, pleased. You free tomorrow? Ivan blinked. Why? I'm testing a new menu at the farmer's market. Want a taste tester? I need someone with dramatic food reactions and questionable socks. Ivan looked at him, heart doing stupid backflips, and internally screamed. He had a note. He had to check the note. I'll, get back to you? Gale looked amused. Sure, I'll be at stall 12. Try not to spill anything this time. He left with a wink and the sound of the door chime following him like applause. Back upstairs, Ivan flung open his notebook like it owed him answers. Sure enough, there was a folded square tucked between his receipts and a half-finished haiku. He unfolded it. "If you say no now, you'll never see the cinnamon roll scene. Don't be an idiot." Ivan stared. "Cinnamon, what?" Milton meowed in unhelpful agreement. "I hate how cryptic I am in the future," Ivan muttered. He looked out the window, toward the street below where Gale's truck was sometimes parked, and sighed. "Fine. Taste testing it is, but if there's a cinnamon roll and it disappoints me, I'm fighting myself in the future." The farmer's market the next day was a colorful, chaotic maze of woven baskets, flower bouquets, handmade soaps, and a cello player giving Taylor Swift songs a melancholy twist. Ivan wandered through it all with sunglasses perched atop his curls and a mission in his heart: find stall 12. And don't pass out. He spotted the banner, G's Gourmet, new menu debut. And there, in a black tee and an apron splattered with sauces, was Gale, sleeves rolled, tattoos out, hair tousled in the way that made Ivan rethink his life choices. Gale saw him and grinned, flipping a tortilla like it was a performance art. "You came," he said. "You said there'd be food. I'm not made of stone. Bold of you to show up after threatening to cry over chocolate." Ivan stepped up to the stall. "Bold of you to make me question every taco I've had before." Gale laughed and slid a paper tray toward him. "First up, my ghost pepper carnitas. Just a warning, this one's illegal in at least 3 emotional support groups." Ivan stared at it. "Am I being hazed?" "Think of it as a trust exercise." Ivan braced himself, bit in, and immediately regretted all his decisions. His face went red. His eyes watered. He flailed slightly. "Oh my God, I can taste colors." Gale doubled over, laughing so hard he nearly dropped a plate. "You sound like you just saw the divine." "Why would you do this to someone you claim to like?" Ivan gasped, grabbing for water. "Hey, I never said I liked you," Gale said between breaths. "You just have a very expressive face." "I'm dying and you're flirting." "You're not dying. Your ego's just spicy now." Ivan recovered eventually, emotionally bruised but physically triumphant. They spent the next hour sampling safer foods, wandering from stall to stall. Gale bought Ivan a mango lemonade to apologize for the attempted murder via salsa. Ivan dragged Gale to a stand selling ethically sourced honey poetry, which somehow involved bees and limericks. Their conversation drifted naturally: books, food, favorite cities. Gale told stories from his time traveling: Barcelona, Mexico City, Istanbul. Ivan watched him more than he listened, soaking in the way his eyes lit up when he talked about night markets and late-night cooking experiments. Finally, they sat on a bench beneath a canopy of string lights. "I came back after my mom passed," Gale said quietly. "She was sick for a long time. I wanted to be near her. I promised her I'd cook for people again. That I'd try. So here I am, trying." Ivan's chest ached. She would be proud. Gale looked at him. "Thanks." They didn't talk for a long moment. The world moved around them, kids laughing, vendors shouting, couples passing hand in hand. Ivan's fingers twitched. He thought of the note. "Don't kiss him yet. He's not ready. But touch his hand. He needs it." His heart pounded. He slowly, carefully reached out and placed his hand over Gale's on the bench. Gale froze. Then he relaxed. Their hands stayed there, still warm, real. Gale didn't say anything, but his thumb brushed Ivan's once, and then again. That night, Ivan climbed the stairs to his apartment in a daze, cheeks warm and heart tangled in 1,000 thoughts. Milton greeted him with indifference. Ivan collapsed onto the couch, pulled out his notebook, and flipped to the empty page he'd saved. There, already waiting for him, was the next note. "Tomorrow, wear the green shirt. He'll say it makes your eyes dangerous. Pretend you don't blush. Spoiler, you will." Ivan laughed softly, then touched his lips, then his heart. "Okay," he whispered. "I'm in." Chapter 3, The X, the Date, and the Duct Tape Disaster. It started with a bang. A literal one. Ivan had been reorganizing the travel section at Once Upon a Spine when the ancient wooden shelf, held together more by hope than nails, tilted and dropped 6 books onto his foot. The crash echoed through the bookstore, loud enough to jolt the cat awake and summon Ivan's curse vocabulary. 10 minutes later, Gale stood in the doorway, summoned by a panicked text Ivan may or may not have sent out of desperation. I'm sorry, you texted emergency shelf massacre may require funeral services, and you expected me not to show up, Gale asked, smirking as he stepped inside. Ivan huffed. It's a disaster. This whole shelf is basically held up by duct tape and shame. Well then, lucky for you. Gale reached into his satchel and pulled out a roll of silver duct tape with dramatic flair. I come prepared. You carry that around. Only for the people I like. Ivan tried not to blush. Failed. Shut up and help me. They got to work. If work could be defined as arguing about whether to use nails or tape, bickering over the best hammering technique, and bumping into each other constantly in the tight space between shelves. You're holding it wrong, Ivan said, adjusting Gale's grip. No, you're holding it wrong, Gale replied, then leaned in to nudge Ivan's arm. The jostle made Ivan slip, the tape in his hand yanking unexpectedly, and somehow, impossibly, in the chaos, their wrists ended up wrapped together. Ivan froze. What just happened? Gale looked down at their now conjoined hands and then up at Ivan. I think we've evolved into a single organism. Congratulations. Ivan laughed despite himself, trying to shake his hand free. Okay, stop moving. Just stop. I'll unwind it. You're the one who flailed. I flailed because you nudged me. You're flail-prone. You're annoying. Gale leaned a little closer. And yet here you are, duct taped to me? Coincidence? Ivan stared up at him, heart doing backflips, the air suddenly thick with something unspeakable. His gaze drifted down to Gale's lips. Soft. Close. Too close. Gale reached out with his free hand, gently brushing a curl from Ivan's forehead. His fingers lingered for a second longer than they had to. Ivan's breath caught. The doorbell chimed. Both men jumped back instinctively. Well, tried to. The tape protested. A woman stood in the entrance. She was striking, dark hair in an artful updo, long coat flaring behind her, bold red lipstick and the kind of confidence that belonged in perfume ads. Gale, she said, voice smooth, dangerously calm. So this is where you've been hiding. Ivan blinked. Gale went still. Marta, Gale said finally. Ivan immediately regretted not checking the morning's note. She was, it turned out, the ex. Not an ex. The ex. Marta, the long-term relationship Gale had never quite explained. The one who left, then came back. The one who made Ivan feel like the backup prize in a dating game he didn't sign up for. She ignored Ivan entirely as she stepped further inside. I came to say I'm sorry, Marta said. I've been thinking, maybe we could try again. Gale opened his mouth, closed it, and then turned slightly as if shielding Ivan with his body. I'm seeing someone, he said. Ivan's breath hitched, but Gale hadn't said who. He hadn't looked at him. Not really. And Marta's eyes flicked to Ivan, sharp and assessing like she was calculating odds. Really? She said, smile tight. Ivan's heart shriveled. Gale stepped forward, his hand still tethered to Ivan's, but not pulling him closer. Not saying anything, just silence. And that silence felt loud. Ivan didn't wait. I should. Go upstairs, he muttered, shaking his wrist loose from the tape. You two should talk. Gale turned quickly. Ivan. But he was already retreating. The note that night sat on his pillow. He hadn't looked at one since the duct tape incident, too embarrassed, too raw. Now, he picked it up with trembling fingers. He's not choosing her. Don't run. Too late. Ivan didn't sleep that night. For the next 3 days, he avoided the taco truck. Every time he walked by, he felt Gale's gaze on him, like gravity trying to pull him back. But he couldn't. Wouldn't. What if Gale hadn't really moved on? What if Ivan had imagined it all? The hands, the heat, the glances. He threw himself into the store, alphabetized the biographies, cleaned Milton's litter box twice in one day, even agreed to help his best friend Tessa with her weekend art fair booth. That was his second mistake. Tessa, an art teacher with 7 piercings, a wardrobe of glitter and combat boots, and a soul made of chaos, was not to be underestimated. You need to get out of your own head, she said Saturday morning, sipping her absurdly colorful smoothie, so I signed you up to help at the pop-up event tonight. No. I have a date with being emotionally repressed. Tessa arched a brow. You can sulk later. Tonight you're helping me set up my glitter and grief installation. It's a metaphor, Ivan groaned. This is entrapment. But he went. The pop-up night event was in a converted warehouse strung with paper lanterns, fairy lights, and live jazz echoing through the rafters. Vendors sold everything from vintage clothes to astrology readings. It was beautiful. And crowded. and Ivan hated how his eyes kept scanning for one person. Tessa shoved him toward a back corner. "Go," she said. "I'm not helping you forever. Also, someone may have bribed me." "What?" But she was already gone. Ivan turned and froze. A single table sat in a nook away from the crowd, surrounded by floating candles and draped in a navy tablecloth printed with book covers, his favorite books. There was a tiny sign on the table, "Dinner for one, and maybe two if you're still mad." Gale stood beside it, holding a plate of something that smelled like cinnamon and heaven. Ivan stared. I bribed your friend," Gale said sheepishly. "I know you've been avoiding me. I deserved it. But I needed to explain." Ivan stayed still. Gale walked closer. "Marta and I ended over a year ago," he said softly. "She came back out of nowhere. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it mattered, until she made it matter." Ivan's throat was dry. "I should have said your name," Gale continued. "I should have told her I was with you, that I wanted you, but I got scared, and that's not fair to you." Silence. Gale sighed. "The truth is, I've been falling for you since you ordered tacos like they were a religious experience." Ivan's lip trembled. "Since you survived the ghost pepper," Gale added. Ivan laughed, despite himself. "And since you looked at me like I was worth knowing, even before I felt like I was." Ivan looked up, blinking through sudden tears. "I should have trusted the note," he whispered. Gale tilted his head. "What note?" Ivan stepped forward and kissed his cheek, gently, reverently. Then whispered against his skin, "I'll tell you over dinner." Chapter 4: The Memory Box and the Fire Escape. Saturday morning smelled like burnt toast and misplaced nostalgia. Ivan was elbow-deep in spring cleaning, a dramatic overreaction to his newfound relationship bliss, or so Tessa had declared with a knowing wink. But something about feeling emotionally secure made him want to tidy everything else. Like love might linger better in a dust-free apartment. The bookstore had closed early for inventory, and Ivan had decided, in a flash of reckless energy, to finally clean out the purgatory that was the space under his bed. Among dust bunnies, 3 unmatched socks, and a half-eaten granola bar, he didn't ask questions. He found it. A beat-up shoebox wrapped in faded red string. The memory box. He hadn't seen it in years. He didn't even remember what was inside. Ivan sat cross-legged on the floor, gently lifting the lid. Old Polaroids, ticket stubs, doodles, letters he wrote and never sent. A dried-up rose from a high school dance. He smiled at the mess of it, his fingers brushing against pieces of who he used to be. And then he found it. A note. Folded. Yellowed with time. The edges frayed, the ink faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable. His own. He unfolded it with trembling hands. "He'll be the reason you believe in love again." Ivan's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the words, those lazy loops, the slightly off slant of the H. It wasn't new. This wasn't from the last few weeks. This was years old. He knew it. He felt it in his bones. A chill prickled his spine. Had he written this before Gale? Before any of this? He didn't know whether to cry or laugh or call a therapist. Instead, he called Tessa. Tessa arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a paint-splattered denim jacket and carrying a paper bag of iced mochas. "I come bearing caffeine and emotional validation," she declared, kicking off her shoes at the door. Ivan handed her the note, wordlessly. She read it once, then again, then gave him a long look. "You wrote this years ago?" "I think so. I must have. I remember this box. I put everything in here during that bad year, remember? The one with the terrible haircut and my neighbor who thought saxophone practice at 2 a.m. was appropriate?" Tessa cringed. "Dark times." Ivan sat beside her. "What does it mean?" She took a long sip of her drink. "It means maybe your heart always knew." "That's terrifying. Or it's romantic. Depends on your caffeine level." Ivan looked down at the note again, then back at Tessa. "But how could I have known?" She shrugged. "Some people write letters to their future selves. Maybe you wrote this for you. For when you were ready to believe again." He swallowed, throat tight. "I don't know if I'm ready." "Too late," she said, bumping his shoulder. "You already do." That night, Gale texted him, "You up for rooftop stargazing? I've got fairy lights and a bribe." Ivan responded with a single word, "Yes." The rooftop above Gale's food truck garage was not fancy, but it was magic. String lights were draped along the ledges, glowing soft gold against the city skyline. A picnic blanket covered the ground, and on it sat 2 glasses of wine and a plate of dark chocolate squares shaped like stars. Ivan climbed through the fire escape, breathless from the view, and from the boy waiting there, barefoot in worn jeans and a soft black tee. Gale turned when he heard the metal creak. "Hey! Hey!" Ivan breathed. "You okay?" Gale asked, eyes searching. Ivan hesitated. "Yeah, just thinking a lot today." Gale nodded like he understood. He probably did. They sat on the blanket, clinking glasses. The night was warm, quiet, except for the occasional car horn below and the hum of life beyond their little rooftop universe. "I made the chocolate," Gale said, passing him a piece. "It's got sea salt and espresso." Ivan took a bite and moaned softly. "That's illegal. Arrest yourself." Gale laughed. "You always this dramatic about food? You're one to talk." They ate in silence for a moment, staring up at the stars barely visible through city haze. Then Gale spoke, voice softer than usual. "My dad left when I was 10. Ivan turned, surprised. Gale didn't look at him, just kept his gaze on the sky. "He said he was going out for groceries. Never came back. I waited on the porch until the sun went down. My mom kept calling his phone until the line disconnected." Ivan's heart ached. Gale continued. "She raised me alone, worked 3 jobs, still found time to sit with me while I cooked pancakes at midnight. She made me promise that no matter what happened, I wouldn't stop loving people, even if they didn't stay." Ivan reached over, touched Gale's hand. "I broke that promise for a while," Gale whispered. "After she passed, I just couldn't open up, couldn't let anyone close. I thought maybe I was too broken to be worth the trouble." Ivan turned Gale's hand over, ran his fingers along the palm. "You're not broken." Gale looked at him then. "You're just someone who's had to heal by himself for too long," Ivan said. "That's not the same thing." The air between them shifted. Slow, tender. Ivan leaned in, uncertain, searching. Gale met him halfway. Their kiss was soft, exploratory, like they were memorizing something important. Gale cupped Ivan's face, and Ivan's fingers found the curve of Gale's neck, the scratch of stubble. It wasn't hurried. It was earned. When they pulled back, their foreheads touched. "I like this. So do I." They stayed like that, wrapped in warmth and quiet, sharing chocolate and stories under the stars, letting the rooftop become a new kind of memory. Later, when Ivan returned home, cheeks still flushed and heart entirely too full, he found a new note tucked beneath his pillow. "Don't be scared of the morning after. This is real. You deserve it." He smiled, folded the note, and whispered into the quiet, "I believe you." Chapter 5. When he found the notes. The bookstore smelled like vanilla candles and paperbacks, the kind of scent Ivan secretly wanted bottled and labeled emotional stability. He stood behind the counter that afternoon, reorganizing receipts with unnecessary focus, nervously glancing at his phone. Gale had texted 2 hours ago, "I'm stopping by later if you're free. I have a surprise." Ivan had responded with a thumbs-up emoji, then immediately regretted the lack of punctuation. Was that too casual? Too emotionally uninvested? Should he have added a smiley? A heart? He was in the middle of spiraling over emoji etiquette when the bell over the door jingled. "I brought cookies," Gale said, holding up a small brown paper bag. He looked effortlessly gorgeous as always, wearing a loose button-up, sleeves rolled, hair slightly windblown like he'd walked straight out of a photo shoot and into Ivan's daydream. Ivan tried not to beam too obviously. "Cookies and surprises. You're setting the bar high." "I like a challenge," Gale said, stepping closer. He leaned against the counter and set the bag down. "Close early tonight?" Ivan nodded, suddenly shy. "Come up. I'll make coffee." They walked up the narrow staircase to Ivan's apartment, and Gale looked around like he was memorizing the space. The cluttered bookshelf, the plants on the windowsill, the hoodie Ivan had left slung over the couch. Ivan made the coffee. Gale wondered. "Where's your pen?" Gale called from the living room. "In the drawer under the tea towels," Ivan replied distractedly, pouring milk. Silence. "Then Ivan?" Ivan looked up. Something in Gale's voice made the air shift. He stepped into the room and saw Gale standing by the kitchen counter, holding a small folded piece of paper. One of the notes. Ivan froze. "It was in the drawer," Gale said softly, eyes flicking up to meet his. "This is your handwriting." Ivan's pulse pounded. I can explain." Gale didn't move, just waited. Ivan took a shaky breath. "They started showing up a few weeks ago, on mirrors, in my journal, folded inside cereal boxes. At first, I thought I was sleep writing or going insane, but they kept happening, and they were always right. Gale unfolded the note, read aloud. Don't let him make the first move. You'll regret it. Ivan laughed nervously. That one was taped to the bathroom sink, the day we met. A beat. Then Gale did the one thing Ivan least expected. He laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but a real one, full-bodied and warm, as if the final puzzle piece had just clicked into place. Honestly, Gale said, that explains so much. Ivan blinked. You're not weirded out? I'm a chef who believes every dish carries the memory of the hands that made it. Why wouldn't I believe in a little time magic? Ivan exhaled, relief flooding his chest until Gale's expression shifted, grew more serious. But why didn't you tell me? Ivan looked down, twisting his fingers. I was scared, that if I told you it would ruin the magic, that you'd think it was a trick, that none of this was real. Gale stepped forward. But it is real. I know, Ivan whispered. Now I do. Gale cupped Ivan's face gently, thumb brushing his cheek. Then let's make our own magic now. The night unfolded in slow motion, as if the world itself had agreed to move gently for them. There were no notes guiding them now. Just touch. Breath. The trust built between stolen glances and shared laughter. Gale kissed Ivan like it was a promise. Ivan kissed him back like it was a prayer. Clothes came off in slow pulls, skin met skin with reverent care. Gale's fingers trembled only slightly when they brushed over Ivan's chest. Ivan whispered Gale's name like he was tasting something sacred. The spicy heat that had simmered between them for weeks ignited. But not fast, not frenzied. There were whispered jokes between kisses, soft gasps against shoulders, Ivan laughing quietly when Gale's stubble tickled his neck. There was trust, real and raw. And when they finally lay tangled together in bed, hearts hammering and limbs threaded like ivy, Ivan pressed his forehead to Gale's. What if the notes stop? He asked softly. Gale kissed the corner of his mouth. Then we write new ones together. Sunlight bled into the room the next morning, warm and golden, touching the sheets, the wall, Ivan's bare shoulder. He stirred, eyes fluttering open slowly, blinking into consciousness. Gale was still asleep beside him, arms slung over Ivan's waist, lips slightly parted. Peaceful. Soft. Home. Ivan reached for the nightstand automatically, fingers fumbling for a note. He always woke to one. Always. Nothing. His chest tightened. But then something fluttered from above. A yellow sticky note, stuck to his forehead, gently peeled off and landed on the pillow beside him. Ivan picked it up. In familiar handwriting, only not his, were the words, Made coffee. Don't wear socks. I like your feet. He looked over at Gale again. Gale opened one eye sleepily and smirked. What? It felt right. Ivan burst out laughing. The future didn't need to send notes anymore. It had already given him everything he needed. Chapter 6. The last note was never written. The smell of fresh coffee and warm cinnamon filled the air, weaving its way through the halls of the new apartment above Café Parallelo, Gale's pride and joy, a cozy corner cafe with dark wooden walls, soft jazz, and a rotating pastry menu inspired by the people he loved. Ivan naturally had his own drink on the menu, the hazel-eyed Heartbreaker, a spicy mocha with a twist of sea salt and a sprinkle of nutmeg. It was Gale's favorite. It had been 1 year since the notes stopped, 1 year since the rooftop, 1 year since Ivan had stopped needing the future to hold his hand, because his present had done it for him. Their new place was smaller than the last apartment, but filled with color and noise and mugs that never matched. Plants thrived on every windowsill. Books took up whole walls. There was a quiet joy in the way their lives had intertwined. Mornings spent arguing over whose turn it was to sweep, evenings sharing leftovers on the floor while watching documentaries they barely finished before falling asleep. Today, however, the apartment was unusually spotless. Because today marked the anniversary of Once Upon a Spine's grand reopening, and the unofficial, first time I ever spilled something on you and insulted your socks, holiday. Ivan stood in front of the bookstore's glass door, now newly etched with ivy and their shared initials beneath the logo. His curls were neater now, but still rebelliously soft at the crown. His hazel eyes had more light in them lately, less fear, more wonder. Inside, balloons framed the register. Tessa had gone rogue with a paint pen and added glittery stars to the restroom sign. Marta stood by the poetry section, now dating a soft-spoken librarian named Aaron, and even she had helped string up fairy lights. Gail's sister Lucia had flown in from New York, bringing pastries from her own bakery and a bottle of red wine that nearly exploded when opened. In the far right corner of the store was a new shelf. It had a little wooden sign Ivan made himself. Love stories that should be impossible but aren't. On it were books like The Time Traveler's Wife, They Both Die at the End, and a heavily sticky-noted copy of Persuasion. Nestled between the titles was a single photo of Ivan and Gail, taken by Tessa, where Gail had flour on his face and Ivan was doubled over in laughter. The store was alive with people, the soft clinking of glasses and clatter of celebration echoing off bookshelves. Gail caught Ivan's hand across the room and nodded subtly. Ivan followed him. Upstairs in their apartment, it was quiet. The party buzz was muffled by floorboards and laughter below. Gail disappeared into the bedroom and returned holding a small wrapped package. Ivan raised an eyebrow. "Is this the part where you reveal you're secretly a time traveler?" Gail grinned. "Close." He handed Ivan the package. Inside was a hollowed-out book. Ivan opened it slowly. Tucked within the carved pages was a note, carefully folded, the edges worn from being touched 100 times. Ivan hesitated. His breath caught as he unfolded the paper. It was in Gail's handwriting. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, it means I found you. And I love you. Now and later." Ivan's chest cracked open. He dropped to sit on the couch, note clutched to his chest, a tear slipping down his cheek. And then another. Gail sat beside him, wordlessly pulling him in, thumb brushing under his eyes. Ivan laughed through the tears. "You've been holding on to this?" "Since that first night you told me about the notes. I wrote it after our rooftop date. I hid it in your favorite book, but you never opened it." Ivan pressed his forehead to Gail's shoulder, voice thick. "You idiot. You're lucky I'm a slow reader." "I was counting on it," Gail murmured. They stayed like that until the apartment felt too small for the amount of love between them. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights were dimmed and the last slice of lemon tart was stolen by Tessa on her way out, Gail tugged Ivan's hand toward the window. "I have one more thing to show you." Ivan groaned playfully. "If it's a tattoo of my face, I swear to God." "Not this time." He led Ivan through the window, out onto the fire escape that curved up to the rooftop. It was the same fire escape they'd climbed when everything had just begun. The same rooftop Gail had transformed with fairy lights and chocolate. Now it was quieter, still. Golden lights still flickered in the dark, casting warm shadows over the city skyline. Ivan stood at the edge, arms crossed over the railing, breathing in the memory of it all. Gail came up behind him, wrapping his arms around Ivan's waist. "No more notes," Ivan said softly. "No more notes," Gail agreed, pressing a kiss to the side of his neck. "Just us." Gail turned Ivan around gently and kissed him, hard, then soft, like punctuation, like a story ending that promised something better after the last page. Another kiss, and another, and another. Until Ivan was breathless and laughing, gripping Gail's shirt and whispering his name like a spell. They sank to the blankets spread across the rooftop, their fingers laced, the city glowing around them, the past folded up and tucked between heartbeats. And somewhere deep in the quiet of Ivan's chest, where fear used to live, something gentle bloomed. Because the last note was never written. Because it didn't need to be. Because he knew. The note stopped because I didn't need the future to tell me what I already knew. I loved him. I always would.